be 6 o'clock, and we're gonna start the special call meeting for the Community Service Committee. And at this time, we would like to go around the room so everybody can give their name who's here present this evening. Start, Mr. Cunningham.
Frank Baptist, Bill Donner,
Dave Mattingly,
Jerry Ponder,
Steve Wood, James Durfield,
Kerry Murphy,
Evelyn Reed.
David Maples,
Shannon Moss,
Deb Staley.
Ron Staley.
You're next.
Laura.
In the back.
Beth Reed. Shelley Poole.
David Vondren,
Steve Bain, Channel 11.
Brett Davis,
Lori Carroll.
I'm Corey, Channel 7.
I'm Stacy Spivey, Channel 7.
Brent Houston.
Thank you. And we do have a quorum for the Community Service Committee, but also we have 9 of our 10 council members here. And so even though this is a community service meeting, we want to hear the opinions from all of the city council members. So you all will be included in the vote, in the discussion, and everything that is going on today. We do have 2 proposals that came in, Friends of the Palace and from Curtis Ferguson. And we had a third one to come in, and I'm gonna turn it over to the mayor and let him explain that one.
Thank you. As most of you are aware, in order to try to facilitate everything, about 2 weeks ago, I sent out an email asking anyone who was interested, those I've been talking with, to have their proposals in by noon last Wednesday. And I want to be sure that we do this procedurally correct. Mr. David Maples, who was here this evening, up in the front of the room, who I have been talking with off and on through connections with numerous council members, as a private entrepreneur interested in the Palace issue, was out of town last week when he and I communicated Wednesday night, I believe it was. He indicated there was no way he could get back in time to meet the deadline. Am I saying that correctly?
That's correct.
Okay. At that time, I told him that if he would have it in before the meeting, I would ask the committee to consider it as a viable proposal to also be shared this evening. And I think procedurally we should do that first.
I would think so, and that you would vote to accept it.
Okay. So we'll require a motion and a second to accept that.
I make a motion, we accept the.
Thank you.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. If you please call the vote now.
All in favor of accepting Mr. Maples' proposal that came in today, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you. Motion
With
approved.
that, there were 3 proposals. Mr. Larry Boucher, who was representing the Save the Palace group, Mr. Curtis Ferguson, who's representing an individual and a citizens group that is working with him, and Mr. Maples. The proposals are here and I think we sent them out to you earlier, a few days ago. Here is copies of proposal 1, which is from Mr. Boucher and the Save the Palace group. Here's proposal 2, in case he didn't bring it, which is from Mr. Ferguson and his proposal. And here is proposal 3. And what I did was, because I received it from Mr. Maples at 2:47 this afternoon, I attached the email and the page of things that he thought was appropriate for his offer, which is the last proposal. With that, I think it would be reasonable to say it in this way. I think you ought to hear all 3 proposals. I think after the proposals, if Mr. Boucher wishes to speak to his, Mr. Ferguson, I believe, is here. He wishes to speak to his, or Mr. Maples. And then once all 3 are made, you can have open discussions, questions and ask them any questions you wish. then I believe it's going to take, I believe it will take a motion on the second to accept any one of the three.
Yes.
Correct. At that point in time, after open discussion, so with that, I will ask Mr. Boucher if he wishes to speak, or would you want me to paraphrase your offer, however you wish to proceed?
I'll speak.
Good, thank you.
Council members, I appreciate your opportunity to give me a chance to speak to our proposal tonight. I think you've already seen most of the proposal from the last time. This is basically the same proposal we submitted the last time we asked for proposals. Our methods of use of the facilities is community, or community gathering space, a place for meetings, a place for dance recitals, a place for possible historic or for displays of Saline County history and about Benton history and about other things. Our rotating bases. That's outlined in our thing. We outlined in our proposal the grants that we were looking forward to. The people we have associated with, such as the Arkansas Historic Heritage Center, the downtown, or the Saline County Historical Society, the National Preservations Committees are all aware of our efforts to save the palace. We are a grassroots effort. We are entrenched in trying to preserve the history so that our children and our grandchildren have the opportunity to have a building that has been here for a long time and has a lot of history in this community. Typically, today, when they build a commercial building, it has a lifetime of about 30 years. 30 years is replaced by something new and better and greater. There's no continuation of history in today's society. Everything has a date, an expiration date when it's going to be replaced. We have the opportunity with the palace, and you people tonight, to save that building and preserve it for future history. And like I've said all along, I really don't care whose group is to save it, who saves it. It is an important part of history of this community that has been vacant, neglected, and needs to be saved. I believe our proposal is a good one. We have things lined up. Our hands have been tied about applying for grants because they never received anything from the city or the council that said we will work with them. So we can at least go to the groups that, like the League of Historic American Theaters. We cannot apply for a grant unless we know we're going to get the building. That's something we have never been afforded to get. Hopefully going forward, we have the opportunity to do that and apply for these grants. We have plans for local craftsmen to come in and replace the windows. We've got bids for that. We've got bids for replacing the roof. That, like I said, our hands have been tied in trying to get this thing done. That's basically our proposal. We're proposing that you save this building, begin to use it for community events, use it for locating historical displays, generate revenue, people into the downtown area, have them spend more money in the shop, help support the shops in the downtown area. And that's basically all I have. Any questions?
Thank you. To save all of our questions, please, let's go through all three proposals and we can ask. That's acceptable to everybody? Mr. Ferguson? Mr. Ferguson?
I'll let you paraphrase it.
Okay. Mr. Ferguson, basically retained, the remaining ones, the conditions and the way he presented it 3 months ago today. One is that the city would spend $175,000 to, let's call it renovate to at least step one, which would include asbestos abatement, the tuck point mortar joint testing and stabilization, some engineering costs along with replacing 16 roof rafters, I believe was the number, and the necessary roofing, which all total would be $175,000. His contention is, from that presentation, but if the city is going to spend $235,000 to tear it down, you can spend $175,000 and save the building. And that's mainly his emphasis, is saving the building, just like Mississippi Shades will. But on top of that, you have other things that has to happen, which their commitment will be over a period of time, no definite period, but 12 months or longer, to try to raise money at least equal to the $175,000 investment the city would make to do other renovations, and including getting it to the culture and historic presence of the building that he suggested some 6 months ago, but would retain all the time and for the future a city-owned building, not a privately owned facility. Got that right? Anything else you wish I forgot? Okay. At this point, Mr. Maples agreed today, and our hectic responses back and forth to each other, to email me what you see on proposal 3. David, would you like to present it or say what your thoughts are on it?
So my name is David Maples. You can see my proposal is very short, very easy to follow. What I would be looking for is city's help to stabilize and standardize the building up to a certain value. At that point, I would make an offer, which is in your proposal, to take possession of the building, and then it would become my property to deal with at that point. I've spoke with architects and in firms throughout the state on different levels for all the mechanical, electrical on the building, the insides and outs. I've got rough drafts for what it would look like. What I'd like to bring to the city would be office space, and also space that would allow for people to be able to have meetings. I do understand the significance of the historic value in the building. So one of the things I'd like to do on the inside after the renovations is to have the history of the building up on the walls, so people would be able to come in and see it. I think that proposal takes most of the weight off the city, but it will require a little bit of help from the city to get it to a point where that investment would be viable for me.
Thank you, and I think another thing that, correct me if I'm wrong, you have said that the facade of the building and all will be cleaned and retained in his historic presence.
Correct. So
Front of the
one of the
building.
things with a historic building, so I brought in some specialists, that's what they do, is historic buildings. We looked at some different options for the outside. We would take and clean the building. If that was adequate, once it was cleaned and reset and the mortar had been corrected, then we'd leave it like that. If it still needed something, then we'd go back to whatever the Historic Society would allow us to do from a color standpoint. So that palette's gonna be very limited, but we would paint the building to match. We'd also set the windows back like they're supposed to be, and it would be historically correct, within reason. Some of that reason would be the archway is not original that's on the front, and depending upon the cost, to be able to take that off and put it back. Some of those things would factor into what we did at the end of it.
One last point, and again, I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to talk. The estimates that you were all given some months ago indicated that it would cost $235,000, including appropriate abatement and disposal, etc., to raise the building and take it down to a slab. Do y'all remember that number? It also said that if we had to do something to sister the wall, which at this point we do not have an engineering study that says it needs to be done, but it would cost $85,000. In reading what Mr. Maples just said, he says, prior to taking possession of the property, the city would stabilize the building and bring it to current code with a cost up to, but not to exceed $275,000.
Yes, sir.
Is that right? So that's $40,000 more than it's gonna cost from these estimates to tear it down. He said he would give $1,000 for the title and take ownership.
Correct.
Okay. Is there anything else about your proposal, sir? Okay, open for all of you to ask whatever questions you wish to know.
Madam Chair, I like that. Mr. Mackey?
Yes, sir.
You've done some research. How much money do you think you're gonna have to invest in that building before it's occupied?
On the low end of it, it's gonna be $600,000, on the high end, $800,000. The reason there's a $200,000 difference, because there's unforeseen things. We're not gonna know until we get into the walls, what that's gonna cost, and we don't know how far off a code we're gonna actually be once the inside's taken down.
So you're making a commitment to make quite an investment in that building?
It's a huge investment, and that's the reason I'm asking for the help from the city.
Thank you, sir.
Madam Chair, may I ask questions?
Yes.
Mr. Mapleton noticed in your proposal, that you do not wish to have any deed restrictions or any contingencies, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, if the council is concerned about preserving the historical nature of the building, as, in particular the front of the building, that it maintain the same side that it has now and preserve that historical, aspect of it, would you agree to have that as a term, of any transfer?
That's one thing that would be, part of it, because the building is listed on Arkansas Historical, so that would be a requirement. That's the reason I asked for no contingencies. That one would be, it would, I
Well,
guess,
that
be
is
considered,
contingency.
right, it would be considered, sure.
Okay.
Mr. Attorney, wouldn't all this require a contract anyway?
It would.
And
the
all that
reason-
would be stated in?
And the reason I ask is because he stated that he did not want any contingencies in there, and it's my understanding that that's one of the reasons why we're here, is preserving the historical nature of this building, and wanting to be certain that he would agree to that term, and that be understood by this community.
So I would do that.
Okay. Mr. Michael, excuse me.
Yes, sir.
You stated that we're to put in approximately $275,000. Is that what your request is?
Up
City?
to, it would be up to that amount, and, so I don't think it would exceed that, I don't think it would come close to that amount, but not knowing what.
What are you asking us to do with that 275?
So, what I'm asking for is the stabilization and those things I listed out in the email for the things that I would be looking for. That would be the asbestos, and I apologize, I can't remember all of them, but the asbestos, the mold, checking the mortar to make sure that it is safe, the roof repair. One of the other things was the electrical being brought just to the building. That's a
To the building?
yeah, the main breaker is very far out of date, somewhere around $25,000-$30,000 in just that one single upgrade.
So you want us to stabilize the building?
Yes, sir.
Bring it up to some kind of electrical code. Now, we're not, you're not talking about code, you're talking about
Bringing it to the building. I'll take care of everything on the inside.
Okay.
Then I ask that the water and the sewer be checked, getting it to the building. Because I don't know where the sewer lines run, I don't know where the water lines run. So if we get out there and the sewer line is collapsed and it's under the street, I would be the one stuck with the cost. And that could be $40,000 to $60,000. But then again, there may be no issue at all, so there would be no cost.
$1,000 that you're talking about is taking care of the title and
Yes.
the transfer and ownership. You would own the building.
Correct.
If we can tear it down for $235,000, we will still own the lot, which is probably worth $40,000.
Okay.
So that would put us out $195, in my opinion.
If you were able
It's
to sell
gonna
the
take a
lot.
hard sell for me to put $275,000 in it and get rid of it for $1,000 and be out $274 when I'm looking at $195. And
Okay.
still retain, at least got the lot. You know, and nobody nobody cared that it was a library. After it became a library, nobody cared what it was after that. It sat there and sat there and sat there and just dwindling down.
Absolutely.
You know, and now, there's a lot of people that, well, there's people that don't want it tore down as long as someone else paid for it.
Absolutely. But I'm in that with you, that my offer, I'm still gonna more than double whatever you guys put up. What it'll take on my end from an investment standpoint.
I'm done there.
I had a question about when you said no contingencies, wouldn't there have to be a timeline, a date for the facade to be fixed on the front from the city? I mean, is that gonna be considered code, or would that be written into the contract?
Into the contract.
That, how long of a period do you think that would take to get the front?
If we were able to get the building brought up like that, we would, talking to the general contractors that would do that kind of work, they're usually about 6 to 8 weeks out. So, you know, depending on that piece, less than 12 months.
So in the contract, all that states that you would have it done in a certain time period. It would be the facade, and inside, whether you ever brought it to fruition to rent to somebody as an office space, you would still own the building and be responsible for all the upkeep afterwards.
And I'd be open to something like that on a counter from you guys.
I'm not on the thunder. Did you have a question earlier?
I did, for city attorney, in order for something like this to occur, would that be part of an offer and acceptance contract with any funds that the city may choose to put toward a project like that, escrowed and invoices paid as those things may or may not occur as it relates to the sewer or the electrical or whatever?
I think we would have to obviously enter into a contract, we have to review those terms. There'd have to be some timelines in there, there'd have to be certain things that would survive closing, such as maintaining the historical nature of the building. That's what the city desires to do. And then we would have to fulfill our commitments on whatever we have agreed to do with respect to that contract and restoring that building. My preference would be to pay people directly and not hand over a check, if that's your question.
It's my opinion as well.
I have a question for Mr. Baker. Would you be agreeable in the event, let's say you got into X amount of months and we had a deadline for you for argument's sake, 2 years, and you got into 6 months and you saw, it's gonna be a little bit more difficult, but you keep going on and you exceed the deadline. At what point we would say, okay, in the event you don't meet the deadline, you would then forfeit the building as is, whatever improvements you made, and then in addition to, you would reimburse the city for the cost of, any cost that the city had out. Would you be agreeable to that?
I'd wanna see all the details on it, but I would, any kind of offer that you guys push back to me, be more than happy to take a look at it and see if it's a deal that we can make work that benefits the city and myself.
Frank, are you talking about after he pays $1,000 for it?
I'm talking about if he doesn't complete the structure, replacing everything that he wants in within a timeline, and if that doesn't happen, then the building would revert back to ownership to the city, and any costs incurred that he would be out of. The building then, as is, any improvements he made would come back, in addition to, he would then owe us any improvements that we make. So, well, I'm asking.
I guarantee you, if it was me, no, I'd laugh in
Well,
the
you
face.
know, I'm asking. Because the way I understand it, each and every group wants assistance from
Once
the
he gives
city.
$1,000 for it, it's his building.
But
Now,
we're
if you
talking
wanna
about.
fine him
Now,
for
we're
We're talking about
code, then that's
contingencies and
different.
so forth.
We
Yes,
are
sir.
writing a contract, though. He's got,
There'll be
Okay,
some
but-
timelines within the contract.
If he violates those timelines, we're looking at having to go get an injunction against him, a mandatory injunction, to compel him to do what he says. Now, there'll have to be a reverter clause in that contract that says if you don't do A, B, and C by this date, then the deed reverts back to the city.
Unless the council agrees to give him additional time.
Yes.
And we would make it maybe whatever we decided on, how much additional time we should get.
Yes.
Well, I mean, we're looking at a project that
Well,
not
if it's
many people
anything
want
like
to
what the
undertake
time we
beginning.
give people to tear or fix their house up, he'll have all the time he wants.
Okay, Alderman Cunningham has a question, I'm sorry.
One of my concerns is, and I think in the process of whatever transactions take place about ownership and this sort of thing, president of the city is, excuse me, my concern is, in the process of changing ownership and this sort of thing, the president will be staying
No,
away.
that's
Okay, one of the things that concerns me is president of the city has the liability for this building. And in the process of going from, in the negotiations, who would be responsible for the liability? Would that go along with the contract? Would it be assumed by the owner? Or the city treasurer?
What liability are you talking
It
about?
is, well, personal safety if something would happen in the process.
Well, I think that part of our agreement with anyone would be that they have liability insurance to cover any injuries to people in the vicinity.
So they would have to assume liability for anything that might take place.
Right, and as you know, the city has tort immunity. But I have expressed a concern that we know that from the engineering reports that this is presumably a dangerous building. And based upon what we have in black and white, and I think that the city does have some exposure if we don't do anything about this.
That's right, I understand
We've got
that.
to do something.
But in the transfer of ownership and everything, and no person would assume liability.
They would assume liability the minute a deed is in their name.
Okay.
I had one question for Mr. Boucher, and maybe it's the city, you can tell me. He made the comment that there's some paperwork that he didn't receive that Mr. Ferguson may have received. Did Mr. Ferguson receive anything from the city?
I don't know
For
that. I've
special
had Mr.
paperwork?
Brent Davis is right here, working with Mr. Boucher for 3 months. Did he get anything, but
No, you got the
you
same.
got everything he asked for?
You got everything he asked for and everything that I understand we gave to Mr. Ferguson.
I just wanted to make sure that.
As far as I know, correct.
Level, I didn't know what it meant, you know, on there for the paperwork that he was asking for. And I just want to make sure that everybody got the same amount.
I think it was cost estimates, wasn't it, Larry? You were looking for cost estimates on?
Well, we were looking for cost estimates, but we were also mentioning that if we had a commitment from the city that they were gonna be willing to work with us, that we could begin to apply for grants.
You can't do that until you own it.
I do have a question for Mr. Boucher. Mr. Boucher, your paperwork indicates that you're a nonprofit, which is correct with the Secretary of State. You've also held yourself out as a 501c3. Have you applied for and obtained that paperwork?
Yes, we have.
You have a 501c3 letter from the IRS?
I do not have it with me, but I can provide it to you.
But you do have it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions. And that's how you would hold the title?
Yes, yes.
That was gonna be my question, because it didn't say in the proposal, you, the Friends of the Palace would be on the title, that's your plan, okay.
Madam Chairman, since the mayor took my time up, may I speak?
Yes, sir.
As a citizen, I cannot imagine us even, as a citizen, I can't imagine this council even considering that proposal, that you would spend $275,000 and then sell it for $1,000 with the expectation that somebody's spending upwards to $600,000 or $800,000. None of that makes any sense. None. I mean, what Steve's proposal makes more sense than that, even though I definitely do not want that building tore down. But we need to rethink this thing. I mean, $275,000 is a huge number that probably is more than it'd take to fix the palace inside and out. You know, you go to architects and then you go to contractors and you get estimates that are way out there, and they cover themselves by doing that. That palace can be, and I realize your budget constraints and the fact that you can't just go out and write a check for that today because you've got all these other projects going. But if you put a roof on that, which is, we're talking about smaller amounts of money. And Steve, not to impugn you or this council, but you all owned that during the time after the library left there. So it was the city's responsibility to keep that building and not let it deteriorate to the point that it is. And I'm sure that none of you were here at that time. Hope you wasn't. But, you know, you can't just say that nobody cared about it because it's really a city responsibility. It was a city asset. It should have been maintained, even though it was not. But you can go into this thing with a lot different idea than just, you know, having to spend all that much money. What I would like to see you all do is just back off and get some realistic estimates on getting the building in the dry, getting the asbestos out of it, and then seeing what some of these groups can come together and put together. It's a large expenditure, but to spend $275,000 city money and then sell it to some guy for $1,000, ain't gonna happen. The city, I mean, the citizens will not allow that to happen. That don't make any sense whatsoever. And to think that he would have to spend $300,000 or $400,000 on or 600 or 800,000, it's 11,000 square foot building. That's $300 or $400 a square foot. And I ran a few things, and you there's no way you wouldn't live long enough to get your money back. So that's not a good investment. So I'm asking you all to rethink this whole project. Let's save the building, but let's get back to some common sense. Let's get back to some common sense solutions and rethink where we can go, bring some groups together that can help. We've investigated that, well, I'll give you an example. The legislature last year, through the county judge, contributed about $200,000 to that airplane, that terminal building. They asked for it and they got it. It was a viable project, it was good for the county, and we have not done that. So, you know, you got another legislature coming up. My point is this, it's been there a long time. It's been in disarray and disrepair a long time. Let's think about a common sense solution on stabilizing it, and then go forward, not just this year, but years to come, that other councils can contribute or budget money to fix it as we go along. Have a good plan the work, then work the plan. But you know, sell it, spending $275, selling it for $1,000, that don't make no sense. Anyway, we're ready to help if we can go forward and do something that can work good for the future, work good for the citizens, and do it for the benefit of the citizens, and the buildings are worth saving. We need to respect those that came before us and try to utilize those things that came before us and blend them into the future.
One thing to that.
Hold on a second. I appreciate that, but on your own proposal from Black, Corley, Owens and Hughes is a budget that you provided with your proposal. And it states total budget building finished out, $1.7,032,500. Now that included the $85,000 stabilizing the wall, and then total demolition budget was $235,000. I do agree with Steve's point about the money. If you demolish it, you do have the property that you can sell. But to say that putting $300,000 or $400,000 in, you can have the building up to standard, I don't understand that, when in your own proposal, you have $1.7 million.
I referred to Black, Corley, Owens on the stabilization. I would never agree with what they had in that proposal about the finished project. There's absolutely no way that kind of money should be spent, but
$150 a square foot, a 10,500 square foot, and it doesn't even have the money about displays for museum. It's just finish out mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems. I know it's a rough estimate, but 1.7 million, and you're wanting the city to keep that. That's a lot more money that the city's gonna be taking over, that you want us, and then put a full-time person in there to run the museum and payroll and all, versus even if we just went with 200,000, and then he had to get the facade up to the historical standard, and then use it for revenue, whether revenue entered it in 2 years or 3 years, at least the city has no longer liability for it, and it's a lot less than even half of this proposal.
Well, that proposal would not be anything that I would suggest. That I think the proposal about stabilization, about the $245,000, I think is pretty legitimate. That would stabilize the building, clean it up, get the asbestos out of it, repair the roof, and take care of the facade. I think that proposal is realistic. Past that, I disagree with you.
May I ask a question?
Then either this is a proposal or it's not a proposal.
Let me ask the question of Mr. Maples, because again, we don't have a chance to talk. You understand that the estimates we currently have to raise the building and take the asbestos and do all the things that are necessary is $235,000, right? We've had that number for some time from Black Coal and Oil and people they spoke to. Okay? At this moment, you're saying 275. Mr. Lee's raising the question, but that's another 40,000 the city beyond tearing it down. Are you negotiable to at least talk about at least a break-even point here for the city?
I would be open to a counter from the city. I just went off of the numbers I was able to obtain.
Okay, so
I don't know
let
how
me put that
old
in.
the numbers are that you guys had for the demolition, but that's one of the things that I looked at to get a point of reference. So I would be open to something different from the city.
So if it's gonna cost us $235 to tear it down, would you take $235 less the 1,000 you're gonna give, so the city does not spend any more for tearing it down than to give it to you as private ownership?
I would be open to that option.
One thing we probably need to talk about, Madam Chair, is the city using public funds for private purposes. You know, there's a constitutional prohibition against that, and this is coming real close to that line, I think. I think that the council would have to determine that there is a public purpose in saving this building, and to keep from crossing over that line and using public money wrongfully. I think that if we go up to the point of this is what is going to cost the city to tear it down, if that is what we're considering doing, that might be that line, and that we should not cross over that. So I think that's something we really have got to consider in this issue.
I would say we don't even, if it's laid out for plumbing, electrical, stabilization, and it's less than that, then we're not even up to that amount. We might be at 180 if we're just getting it up to the standard of the shell, the roof, the plumbing and electrical. I mean, that's what.
If we stabilize the building, you cannot convince me that building is worthless after stabilizing the building. I mean, I wasn't born yesterday.
That's
A
why.
lot is worth 40. Scrape it off, you've got that much. But to stabilize it, it's worth something.
I know you're throwing
I
out
mean,
the 40, but do we actually have any kind of information about property around there to verify that amount?
Yes.
Just 40 of the amount?
Yes.
I think one of the things, I think the attorney.
45 to 68.
Introduced a pretty realistic sort of situation.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
If we're gonna put money into a building, improve the city money, put it into a building to improve it so we can sell it. Is this not in some way meeting the law that he's talking about violating the law he's talking about?
Are you suggesting that we improve it and then keep it? Is that what you're saying?
No, I said if we invest money in the building to improve it.
Yes.
And then
break even.
with the idea that we're gonna sell it to somebody, is that not, it makes a law, it sort of indicates to me that there is some problem with us doing that, because we actually, if we're improving something, get rid of it.
Well, we're gonna have to do something. I mean, at this point, I mean, I think there's a negative equity value. And the city is looking at having to do something to this building. Whether it's tear it down or repair it, you're gonna have to do one or the other.
But if we tear it down, we still have ownership of what it's left with.
You still have ownership of the land. You could certainly improve it, and make those necessary improvements that we're talking about, stabilize the building, and keep it for future use. But you're gonna have to bite the bullet and spend the money that the
Let me
council has
remind
not
everyone,
paid in the past.
that for months now, $175,000 for whether it be for Save the Palace Group or Mr. Ferguson's group has been talked about as a request from both of them for the city to do at a minimum. Whether you consider proposal 1, 2, or this, and this gentleman, I just think a minute ago said he considered 235 now as the top of his number. And we're all digested for months that 175 was gonna have to be at least a beginning point versus 235 to tear it down. And the logic was, I mean, if we're gonna spend 235 to tear it down, let's say 175, but nobody wants to take ownership. We still have to do whatever we have to do to maintain and own it. You now have a chance, if I understand this right, for somebody to take private ownership for 235, which I understand is what, 60,000 more than the 175, and take ownership of it, and in a reasonable period of time, we no longer have that liability, and they have to maintain it.
And it keeps historical.
And it keeps the historical presence of the facade in the front.
So for,
Let him talk, he's gonna buzz.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Brissett was trying to ask a question
go.
too.
Just wanted to add a couple of things in there. We did request somebody to help bring up to stabilization point. I don't believe we'll have to go up to the full $175,000. I have read the asbestos report. There's one wall that has to be contained and taken care of. But a lot of the asbestos is non-friable in that building. There's floor tile in there that contains asbestos, but does not have to be abated if you go in there and overlay the floor. So I don't think we will actually be asking you for the full $175,000 amount. We are willing to take over the liability for that building. We put in $250, but we will take the liability for that building from the city. We will maintain it from that point on.
After it's stabilized?
After it's stabilized. We have worked with local artisans. You're talking about replacing the facade, all the windows in the front of that building and on the side. We have a quote for less than $4,000 to do that. And that can be paid for a grant. Unfortunately, we can't apply for it until next year. But they'll give us a $10,000 grant to fix that facade up, and it costs $4,000 just for the windows. That leaves us $6,000 for the door and the overhang to bring that thing up to absolutely up to what it looked like before the library was there. So we have worked through a lot of these details. We are not looking, like I said, we are not looking for the full $175,000, but we're looking to work with you guys to keep that as a minimum. We have identified ways to keep that to a minimum. We just want to have the opportunity to work with you guys. We'll take the ownership from the building from you guys and apply for the grants and so on and so forth, whatever agreements you want as far as turning back. We don't make it in 24 months or 12 months, whatever you want to say. We are willing to take that risk as a group, as a nonprofit, do that.
Yes, then, Alderman Lee, excuse me.
It's totally apparent, nobody wants it until it's stabilized. And either you stabilize it or tear it down is gonna cost money. And there is a line of we can't spend a lot of tax dollars and all of a sudden hand it over or give it to a private deal, because it'd be worth something. What would be wrong with, and this would be an option, to stabilize the building, and let's be honest, we don't want to retain ownership of it as a city. Auction it off. And who really wants it will win the auction.
City can do
Because
that.
city can auction off property.
Yeah, the city can do that, can auction it off.
How did that come from?
Speechless.
I wish I'd thought of that.
That's the only thing that makes sense to me tonight.
That's a good idea.
And on your birthday,
On my birthday, that 4th of April.
that's your present.
That's my present.
That,
That's the mayor's present.
it
Words
was,
of wisdom.
it didn't come.
If you did auction it though, can we legally hold anybody liable to have to keep the facade historical and all that?
I think that,
Auction is just theirs, they do what they want.
I think we could make that a term, a condition.
You're looking at probably who the bidders are. I mean, we don't have a line down South Street to the interstate wanting this.
Well, if you do it that way, somebody might come in you don't know about, but, I mean, I just wanted to make sure that we keep it historical if we did auction it, and he said it's
I
possible
hope
to do
there's
that.
100 bidders on it.
But you would still have to sign a contract to auction.
We had, yeah, we had to,
Right.
contract, we had to have some kind of stipulation. Yeah,
But you said we cannot auction.
Yes, sir, I said we can auction.
We cannot.
We can auction.
Do we have,
We auction
So
all
that's
stuff.
the fourth.
Well, in this case, when would you hold the auction? Because the gentleman behind me's talked about having grants,
Well,
they
it
don't have
can't
any
be
money.
tomorrow.
You're eliminating them right away.
older lady,
We need to be eliminated.
Yeah, that may be right.
Yes, Alderman.
do we have a current, up-to-date cost of what it would take to bring the building up to being stable? And what would that include? The roof, walls?
That's about
Plus is
it.
abatement, $26,978. 3,200 square feet of damaged wood decking, 50 wood rafters, including tear off and replacement of approximately 18 square backside of parapet, including 20,500 estimate for masonry tuck point, 2,500 for structural design, 10% contingency, and the balance is the roof cost, equaling $175,000. Now, if you can get a contract for less than that for the roof, which would be 26, 46, 90, $192,000, fine. Then it'd be 169 or 168 or something else. But until you let it for bid, you don't know what that is.
And
These are
stabilize
estimates
the
done by
wall.
Black, Corley and Owens after researching all that information.
How old are those figures, Mr. Mayor?
January 25th of this year, 4 months.
Alderman Lee.
If we decide that the auction part's the way to go, any bid under 235 is to our benefit. That's the only way to look at it.
You said any bid under that.
Any bid to get the building to stabilize under 235 is to our benefit.
I was with you.
I caught up.
What would you think? There ain't no way I gotta have it.
I just misunderstood what you said. That had to be it.
I couldn't believe it.
Make me feel at home now.
We can have all the estimates redone if you would. This is the third set of estimates we've had the last year and a half.
Yeah.
They're not gonna change much. You got 97 or 69, 68,000 and some change involved in all the things, and between 91 and 101,000 to replace the roof. Those were those estimates in January.
So we'd have to run it by our finance chair, or committee, to see if we were gonna spend that kind of money to stabilize it, correct?
Demolish it.
If you're saying these are the only three that are gonna do the auction, okay, just for instance, then, the proposal by Mr. Ferguson is 0, cause he wants the city to own it.
Well, I can tell
And
you,
the
I'm gonna
proposal
be
by
there,
them is 250,
'cause I might wanna
and
bid
the
on
proposal
it.
by him is 1,000. So, if this is the only three, which you believe it might be, we're in the same boat. And if he backs out, or for some reason in that amount of time decides he's out of it, then and they don't get the grants that they're looking for, then we put all this money into this building and it's still ours, and nobody, it's.
Nothing changes.
I would just have to believe that if you repaired this building to that extent, that there's gonna be more people show up than not. I mean, I can't
I
guarantee that, obviously,
guarantee
but I
you,
would.
I'm gonna be
think
there,
it's a
cause if it's
possibility.
low, I'm gonna buy it.
Oh, you're picking it up. Oh, okay.
I could, you know.
So do we
I'm
need?
not saying I will.
So do we need to have a motion either to repair it structurally or tear it down? Do we need to have that motion right now? And then after that, we decide if we're doing auction or if we're
I think
somebody.
we're going to see if you got the budget first to spend whatever it's gonna take to.
That's right.
Because we're talking about spending money, and unless Alderman Ponders, finance committee okays it, or brings it for a full council, we're back to nowhere.
Yeah, the mayor's gonna have to agree on that.
Council.
So it's
Where was the 175,000 gonna come
We
from
got
that
for
we
2.5
talked
to
about?
ask Alderman Ponders.
Yeah, we've been talking about that for some time.
And I don't think he can just find it in a sack right now.
Madam Chairman, I think this is a great idea. I think it's a viable building. I think it could be used for many purposes, might not be what we had proposed. We proposed the cultural center and museum to have a use for it, but if you'll think about it, the city right now is going through a change for the utilities and so forth. The city needs space. He may be the one to use it, but it becomes a viable business building if you will stabilize it and add to that cost, Mayor, cleaning the inside of it, getting the building clean inside so and the ceilings are falling in, so you need to pull in there. And you're gonna have people step up to bid on that building that want to put in some business. And at the price that you're talking about, and with some sensible, not Taj Mahal, Terry, in remodeling, it could be used in very good, it could be converted to a very good purpose in and Benton is alive. Downtown is good. It's doing well. So you're gonna have a lot of interest in that building that you don't have any idea of. And it's gonna come.
You just shouldn't have said Steve had a good idea.
It was a great idea.
We'll hear
Yeah,
that
it was.
We'll hear that for the next 10
Yeah, it
years.
was.
I think at this point, unless there's further discussion, you have to have a motion to have finance, with Jerry and I will work on this with the committee. Certainly won't take us long to research where we're gonna find $175,000 or not, and charge us with that through a motion to take the building to auction within 90 days.
After stabilization.
After stable, well, we can't
can't
get
do
it
90 days,
stabilized. I can't get it stabilized in 90 days. 6 months?
I mean,
After
it's not like it hasn't been rocking on for a whole long time, like a couple of years or so.
Can we ask, is this going to knock any one of the three proposals? Or if we do this, is this gonna make them withdraw their proposal for anything in the future? Or are they gonna be all up to making their bids?
These two aren't gonna be knocked out of the game. The only one it might be is Mr. Maple.
All of their proposals require stabilization, so why should it knock them out? Except the only thing that scare them off would be the possible, the auction.
I'm banking on, I can get it for $350.
No, cause I'll be at $351.
Madam Chairperson.
Okay, yes, sir.
I think we're right at this point, and it's particularly with, we've talked about the treasurer, making sure that the money's available, what it will cost you, what we can afford to spend it for. I think it'd be good for us to get that information first, and then come back and try to decide what we need to do. I don't have any problems with what's been suggested with the auction, but I think it'd be good for us to know how much can we afford to spend, and then come up with
How much we can want.
Or you have no choice but to bring it all the way back to stabilization, so
Well,
if it's
we have no
200.
choices, we have no choices at this point, we have made one decision. But I think it'd be good for us to know what's available at this point, if we want to go to auction, but we need a minute.
So what we need to do is refer this to finance committee for.
Finance committee first, and then once he tells us what's available at this point.
Madam Chair, I'd make a motion, we refer this issue to the finance committee to study the cost of abatement. Stabilization. And abatement.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Alderman Donner and a second by Alderman Cunningham to, bring this before the finance committee to see if we have the funds to spend $175,000 to bring the building up to stabilization.
Discussion?
Yeah.
Any discussions? Yes.
I would like, if that is the will of the council, I would like for this to occur in the finance meeting to provide information to this committee so that you can consider it at the Community Services Committee meeting the first Tuesday of July. And let's kick the football one way or the other, without putting it off a long time.
I accept that.
July the 5th is, excuse me, is, with the next meeting will be, which is after the 4th. So you wanna do that on the day after the holiday, or you wanna defer to another special meeting in the middle of the month?
I will be gone, not that my presence is all encompassing on this, but, the last half of July, I'll be gone.
Well, then let's have it the last half of July, then we
That's
can.
exactly right.
Well,
You wish.
who,
We can
You
have
have
it
to be here on the
followed on the
5th.
11th, or when do you leave?
who'd be here on the
We can have it on the
5th?
11th, which is the following Tuesday.
I would like to
July
find out
5th.
within a week. And let's
July 5th. Most of us on this end, we can meet July the 5th day.
I'll let it be at your wishes as to when it is that you set the date for the committee meeting.
Is there a conflict with anybody with July the 5th?
It'll be a Tuesday.
That's when the proposal
That's
from
the-
finance
that's
will
the
be back
next-
saying where they have the money, if they have the money. where
That's
we
the
at.
next regular scheduled community service meeting.
That works for me.
We're asking to stabilize it, to tear it down, we gotta do something.
So I'm on the finance committee, I agree with you.
Yeah, I think it needs to be.
Almost.
Surgery's gonna be done on the 7th, but
We'll make every effort to have the information in your hands, within a week.
The amount is the only question I did have. I do think you need to at least look for the 235, but the motion was for 175.
What you gotta find out first, where the money's gonna come from. I'm on the committee also.
Right, but I don't want him to look for 175 and it's gonna cost us 230, then he has to go back and look for the other
Well, yeah.
balance. So if he can't get there, he can't get there.
I think we're gonna be all right. From
We
everything
got-
that I've talked to the engineers and architects about. And I think David would accept that as well. Mr. Boucher has never questioned that the 175 was a reasonable number, and
Right.
neither did Mr. Ferguson, so I think we're in the ballpark.
Okay.
There's one question, if you guys don't mind, I'd like to add, that's okay. So in my proposal, I'm asking for up to 235. So if the stabilization is only 175, then that's all that I'm required. That's all I'm asking for, just up to that amount to be available. So if the number's 175 and the city saves that extra balance, I'm fine with that. So it's not like I'm asking for all of that money, just enough to get it stabilized. So I wanted to make sure that was clear, because that number kept coming back up. That I'd ask for that, I only asked for up to that, just to cover anything that we may not know about.
So this is what
Make
we're
you
saying.
bitter.
And this is what we're
Makes them
saying.
bitter.
Yeah, we're just going to check with stabilization and make, go to the finance committee, see where we get that money at, to make sure we can do what we say we're gonna do. And then we'll come back and report to Alderwoman.
I just wanted to make sure
How
that
long
was
does it
clear
take
on
to
that.
execute a contract for us as a business? We're looking at 6 to 8 weeks to find
Madam Chair,
somebody.
if you did follow through on this, I can't see how we would run even close to the constitutional prohibition. By restoring it, stabilizing it, and auctioning off, because at that point, there's no favoritism at all. It's whoever wants to come with a check. So I can't see that that's spending any public money for a private purpose, handling it in that fashion.
Can't get it up and down.
Keep making it
I call it Finance Committee to determine $175,000. You have a motion to call?
Yes, sir. But is the July 5th regular community service date okay with you? Okay. All right, then, at this time, we will entertain the motion we have on the floor, from Alderman Donner, second by Alderman Cunningham, and the finance committee is gonna get the figures that we need, bring it back, and we will have it at the regular scheduled community service meeting, which will be July the 5th at 6 p.m. here in the mayor's council, conference room. All in favor for the motion on the floor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion
I'm
carries.
assuming you would all like to know the answer to this long before July the 5th, and we will work on that starting in a day or two and get you an answer second. Is that acceptable?
And are you gonna, and so we're gonna be pretty close to that one
I
seventy-five
think
ball.
you're gonna be within $10,000 of it.
So if it's 230.
Anything else?
That's all you can have.
I know it. That's it.
Okay?
All right.
Good.
Thank you all for coming. We'll adjourn.
Thank you.